Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of ILEETA Live. What are we at? 243 days until the next ILEETA conference. Not that I'm counting or anything, but what was it, like
Oh, it's so
270
long.
last time we met? So we are getting close. Tonight, we have another very special guest, Team One Network's John Meyer. And without any further ado, this is all about our guest here. John, tell us who you are for those that don't know who John is.
Okay. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. This is my first podcast or whatever. I'm not used to doing these, but I'm looking forward to it. So I am the president of Team One Network. This is our 20th anniversary, and that's what we've been preparing for. We have a big instructor conference that we have every year, and we have a big party, and we're doing a reunion for this party from all the three different entities that I've been with in my law enforcement career. So I have people coming from my DOD police days and also my HK days and also Team One. So we're expecting about anywhere from 70 to 80 people for the party for the reunion. And so my background is started Team One in 2003. Prior to that, I was with Heckler and Koch. I started there in 1988. I was an instructor and worked my way up through it. I became deputy director of training, then director of training, then VP of sales for law enforcement, and then VP of all sales, and still director of training, international training for H&K. Prior to that, where I got hired, Phil Singleton hired me at H&K, and I was with DOD when I met Phil. I was Department of Defense Police at Picatinny Arsenal. I started there in 1981, and it was great timing because Reagan just got into office, and he decided that all military installations would have a special reaction team support. At that time, the only support that they had was a local FBI team. And if they had any terrorist incidents, and as you know, back in the early 80s, terrorist incidents, well, they're still there, but terrorist incidents were a very big thing. And we got a lot of funding for that. And when I was with DOD, they sent me all over. I was one of the first DOD people to go through EST training, which was actually Air Force down in San Antonio. And I had just gotten out of the Air Force about 5 years prior to that. And it was neat going back to basic training camp where I didn't have to pay attention to what the DIs were saying. And so that was nice. But I went through that. Then we were asked. We took the first DOD team through the SRT school down at Fort McClellan, and Joe may have went through Fort McClellan when he was an MP, but we went down there. We took the first DOD team because they didn't think that the DOD people could actually go through the training, survive the training. It was a 2 or 3 week, I think it was 2 week course where you lived there on the base. And you had to do all this stuff. And we had all these young teams that were Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force were all there. And most of the average age of my team was about 30, and the average age of the military teams were about 21. And they didn't think we could make it. And we did, and that I got attention to some big generals there. And after that, I got asked to come back down and take the next DOD team through the SRT program. So, and they had all the money. They sent me I went and trained with LAPD SWAT right before the Olympics. Then I had an opportunity to go work with ESU and at an NYPD, and so we had a lot of good times. And then Phil Singleton hired me at H&K, and we did a lot at H&K. We had a great team, and there's so much. I don't want to go through that with my background because I'll just bore you to death. But there was a lot of things that were going on. So, and that's how I ended up here now. Um, uh, 40, 40 some years in law enforcement and law enforcement training. So,
Well, thanks for your service, and thank you for your continued support for ILEETA. We really appreciate that. Wanted to introduce you before we introduce the rest of the folks here on the panel. Todd Fletcher up there in Canada with Billy Bob Etheridge, and I told them if they're going to have both of you on that you have to speak in Canadian accent. So I hope you've been practicing. And then Joe Willis, we're always here. We enjoy these conversations. And before I kick it over to them for a question, you talked about H&K, and I understand that you may have had an H&K Hummer. Was there a chance? Was there a time in your past that Hummer may have gotten stuck somewhere?
God, how do you get that information? My wife on this?
He may be.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we did get a Hummer. We actually got two Hummers from a Hummer dealer. Oh, it's down south somewhere. I want to say in Alabama or Georgia or whatever. And they took the first Hummer and they made it nice, put leather seats in it, radios, and all that stuff. And we took it and we drove it around, and it was pretty neat. It was still very, very loud for those of you in the military. It was just a Hummer with leather seats and still miserable to drive on the road and all of that. But I think I'm trying to figure out, it may have been Jason, my son's birthday. Yeah, it had to be my son's birthday. And we decided to throw them all in the back, and we were going to take them for a little ride. And yeah, I did everything that you're not supposed to do with crossing a gully or a stream or whatever. And I got it stuck. So the short story is, the way my wife likes to tell it, is that after hours, she drove it out, you know, and, she'll tell you that she had to go get a come along because I didn't want somebody to try to tow us out. It would have cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars to have a tow truck go back to where we were and pull it out. But so we come alonged it out, and my wife drove it out. I have to say that. I have to say that the rest of my life.
Oh, I
I
reached out to your son Jason and asked him for some story I could kind of ask you about, and that was the one that he came up
That's the one they pick. That's the one they pick.
with. That's the one.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah, that's it.
So I'll throw it over to Joe.
Hey, so since we're in a little bit of this levity space, one of the trademarks of Team One Network is definitely without a doubt footwear. Like Loa is a longtime sponsor. We had Jeff Johnsgaard on here the other day, or the last month, talking about a wide variety of stuff, reality-based trading kind of stuff, and we'll get to a lot of that with you as well. But what is the preferred footwear of Team One Network? What's John Meyer wearing right now?
Yeah. Wow, you guys are really going after. I thought we were talking about training. There it is. Right?
Yeah.
All right, you all happy now? Okay.
So we are going to keep it light. I'm excited. I love these conversations. I look forward to this every month, regardless of who our guest is. But my relationship with Team One, it's no Mr. 801 out there. I have a long-standing, deep relationship with Team One Network. I absolutely love the organization. It's like a family to me. And so I've been looking forward to this one. One of the things you mentioned, H&K, and you kind of breeze through that really quickly, but there's a lot of stuff that folks don't know about the relationship with H&K and Redman and John Meyer, Gary Klugowitz, and the olden days there, that I think when we really talk about the reality-based training and where some things all started to come together, there's some really cool stuff there. Can you give us kind of a thumbnail sketch of what those days were like and a little bit of what happened back then?
Sure. Yeah, I would love to, because it's a fantastic. But I probably need to start at my DoD days a little bit, because we ran at DoD. We ran a lot of courses for outside agencies. When I say outside agencies, a lot of police agencies came to Picatinny to take what we called our 6-day TAC team course. And one of the things in that course is that, we ran a lot of scenarios and stuff like that. And basically they were shoot, don't shoot scenarios. You came in, you did raids or whatever. But when it came time where somebody was giving up, or, somebody was just not complying, but you couldn't shoot them, the way we did it back then is you reached up, you touched the guy on the shoulder, or the bad guy on the shoulder, and that made them comply. And you did, whatever your tactics were, happened, and they went down on the ground, and it was easy. And when I got to H&K, I was like, we have to do better than this, because what are we training our people to do? We can shoot them, no problem. Shoot them, no shoot, okay, and then everybody complies. But that's not the real world. We all know that. In real world, I remember I went into a disturbance in a bowling alley, and a guy wanted to be a pain in the ass. I'll try to keep my language right. And I went to grab him. I grabbed him, and I did the whole wrist lock, the whole thing, and it didn't work. And I ended up kicking him in the groin and got him down. But that, and I was like, okay, so what do we do in our training thing when it doesn't work? Because right now it always works. We're always teaching people, okay, you touch the guy, it goes down. So before ASLET in 1990, now back to H&K, right? When we were doing that, I started H&K in '88, and in January of 1990, I saw an advertisement for Gary Klugowitz's active countermeasures course, active countermeasures instructor, and it was happening right before ASLET. And I was going to ASLET anyway for H&K, and I thought, okay, I'd like to go early, and Phil, no problem with that. And I went there, and I went through Gary Klugowitz's active countermeasures course. And I'm like, oh, this is exactly what we need. And he had Redman gear there, and we were doing all different types of strikes, and he was explaining fluid shock and all kinds of different things. But then I asked Gary, I said, Gary, I need to be able to do this while I have a submachine gun slung around my neck, or I have a pistol in my hand. And everything that he was doing then was all empty hand, with no pistol or any or submachine gun. So we talked about that, and at ASLET, I talked to Gary all through the ASLET convention, and we did businessman lunches, or business lunches, I guess they were, where I said, oh yeah, I'll try that. I figured we were just going to go to some nice restaurant. Well, it was basically go to the gym and kick the shit out of each other, and with different stuff and all that. And I was totally exhausted by the time I got through this conference, because I already spent 3 days with him, and but it was a great learning experience. And I thought, okay, we need to bring this into all of our tactical training. So we actually need to actually take people down to the ground and control them and go through the whole deal. And then I brought Gary in to a special event. We brought selected instructors in at H&K. And when I say we brought them in, we didn't have a lot of money or budget for this, but I offered all the instructors came in on their own dime. We brought Gary in. We paid Gary to come out, and he brought Larry Hahn with him. And all you ILEETA people know Larry also. So I didn't know Larry. Well, I did know Larry because I went through the course with him, with Gary. And we brought all these HK instructors in. There were probably, I'm going to say at least a dozen, maybe more. and we all went through an active countermeasures course. Well, H&K had just gotten a contract with the State Department to train all the people in the state of Washington, all those SWAT guys in the state of Washington that were going to respond to the Goodwill Games. This was in 1990, and it was back in, I think, in June. And so they had teams from all over Washington, mainly Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane, and then some other places. And they had a group of 50 people. We trained them on our TAC team course, and we did a live fire shoot house course for them. And that's where I met Skip Pavlicek, who was one of the guys going through the class. We actually recruited him for an instructor. And but during that course was the first time we said, okay, we're going to put active countermeasures in this class. And Gary and I, we had 50 people. So we split the class. We had 25 in one group that were doing tactics, and the other 25 were doing active countermeasures. And at that time, we had some red man suits and fist suits for the instructors. And so just so you get a clear understanding, is that January is when I met Gary. I went through his 3-day course, and then went through the ASL. Then we went through a little 3-day course at H&K, and then we went to Seattle and did this Goodwill Games thing. And I was the second instructor for Gary, right? And I got my ass handed to me. I was solid black and blue after going through this course. I remember Gary would tell me, John, you got to keep your head up, keep your head up. I was worried about getting hit in the throat. And I keep my head up, and then I get kicked in the groin. And I'd go down, and then I get kicked in the head, and I was like, this is not working here. I'm just not getting it yet, And, but Gary was a trooper. He put me, we went through this whole thing. And then after the first 25, we rotated and we did another 25. And, but it was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience. And, when we talk about experience, making bad decisions is how you learn to make good decisions. The second half, I was starting to make better decisions about getting hit. So it was very interesting. But and then when Gary, what was nice about that, and Gary will tell you this, is that when Gary did that training, then after that, he stayed and he watched us do the entries. And when we did the entries, it was shoot, don't shoot, or got to take this guy down, elbow strike him, angle kick him, whatever, knee strike him. And we were doing all that and taking people down to the ground. And it wasn't just a shoot, don't shoot. And people actually had to, get hit enough. And we had our role players that understood that, okay, if it was a wimpy strike, you didn't go down. They had to come back and do it again. And it was great. And everybody loved it. And then we added an active countermeasures instructor to our curriculum for our courses. And our TAC team course, that active countermeasures course, it was a 5-hour block that we put into every every TAC team course and every TAC submachine gun course, and every class that we had tactics in, we added that block. And we brought Gary in there to do it. And then it carried on, and everybody just loved it. And so that was a big deal for us, because now we started using simunitions also at that time. At first it was just, bang, bang, you're dead. I don't know if you can say cowboys and Indians or bank robbers and cops or whatever, but, it made it much more realistic. And there were times that, there was just a big dog pile, and we've all been involved in that if you've been in law enforcement, where, okay, some of this isn't working, but we made it work. So I don't know if that answers your question, Joe, but that was the start of active countermeasures with Gary, and also the Red Man gear. So the funny part of that, since I'll talk about the funny things, is Gary had the Red Man gear, and he he couldn't find a way to transport it, and he would put it in banana boxes. And there were 50 banana boxes coming to HK with all this red, and people were like, "What is going on with banana boxes?" And then we'd have to pack them all up and back there. But they were a really good, sturdy box. So on the back end of that story, years after that, Gary was looking for better boxes, and we had Benelli boxes, and so I sent him all these empty Benelli boxes so he could put his Redman gear in. And his neighbors, when 20 Benelli boxes ended up in the garage or in his driveway, they were thought like, "What the hell is going on? Is there a militia starting or something?" And they were all empty. But anyway, so that's some funny
So
stuff.
they did answer the question, and I think one of the things that we've gotten a little bit of time to talk tonight, and I'm looking forward to turning it over to Todd and Billy with their questions. But this is what this is all about, right? Is we're going to talk a lot of the history stuff, and there's so much, like the introduction of Simunitions and Redman and all the impact gear, all the marking cartridges that kind of came into reality-based training right around that time. I mean, when you wander the halls at ILEETA, you're going to run into John Meyer, Ken Murray, and Gary Klugowitz pretty much in rapid succession at some point in the expo, and there's a tremendous amount of history right there that we just laid out. And speaking of ASLET, I don't know if you even know this story, John, but the first time I met John Meyer, speaking of two figures of ILEETA, was at ASLET. When he and Coach were blocking the door, and I was wondering, who the hell are these two guys that won't get out of the way so that I can get around to get to the class I need to get to? Little did I know, Echo Niebergall was bringing John and his team over to Germany not long after that, and I would re-meet him again over there. But yeah, there's so much history, and it's so much fun to talk about. But I've already taken quite a bit of time with my question. Todd, Billy, what do you have on your mind?
So I've got my own questions, but this kind of flows into something that Billy's got going on right now at his agency. So I'm going to kick it over to Billy.
So John, right now we're at my agency, we're building the scenario-based Sims training building and trying to put all that together. And we've never had any of that stuff before. So I'm just wanting to know, what is your piece of advice that you'd give me to build good scenario-based training so my students get the most out of it?
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, it just has to be real, and you have to look at it. The biggest thing is, it's not just, okay, we're going to run this scenario and people, let's see what happens. It's got to be scripted out. You got to know exactly what you're trying to teach them in this scenario. What is happening? The safety is utmost. You have to make sure you're the instructor. You're responsible for everybody's safety, not just the students, everybody's safety. And it's just go through all of it step by step. What are we trying to do? We're still doing that. We just came up with a counter ambush instructor program, and we had a dozen guys working on this and going through the scenarios with cue cards. And the biggest thing is that role players cannot do whatever they want to do or ad lib or anything. They have to stick to the script. But when I say stick to the script, they have to understand what's going on. If somebody doesn't do something that they're supposed to, then they can't just give up. There's no learning experience there. But they have to understand it. So your role players have to understand what they're trying to do. So scripting, understanding your role players are just as important as your instructors, and safety. The safety stuff is driving me freaking crazy. When I see, and I know everybody on this call, when you see an officer that gets injured or killed in a scenario-based training class, it's disgusting. There's no reason for it. So, but I mean, it would be easier for me if you have specific points. We add as much realism as possible. When like our active shooter program, everybody's got, you got noise, you got the radio or music blasting, but we put sprinklers, we put a sprinkler system in and fog to smoke or whatever from gunfire. So all of those elements, all of your senses are being affected, not just sound, and visual, but you want everything to be affected. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It helps a lot.
I kind of want to go back to the HK thing, but I don't want to dwell on the HK thing. Your experience at HK has had a lot of influence on you. So HK training, when I first came into law enforcement, was the best of the best training. It's like, if you wanted to be trained the right way by the right people, you went to HK, right? And so I went through an MP5 operator school. I went through an MP5 armor school. And, one of the people that's been very influential as a mentor to me is Clint Smith. And, he was in that role at HK. You were in that role at HK. And so I don't really want to rehash the HK thing, but I do want to ask you, how did your time at HK directly influence what you do and how you do things now with Team One?
It's a great question. So the biggest thing that happened at HK was that we put together a team. It was like a perfect storm. We had a team of people that everybody contributed. We had no hangers on, no nothing. Every one of those people were part of that success. And I mean, from our training coordinator, Pat Rios, right, made HK. And probably most people had to deal with her. But the instructors that we brought on were just really good. And they were what raging A personalities. They weren't people that, okay, tell me what you want me to do and I'm going to do it. They were people that had their own ideas and they were passionate about training and keeping officers alive. So that's what made that. So I mean, I was very honored to be part of the leadership of that. But every one of those people were leaders in their own right. That was something unique. And they were raging A personalities. So, and if you've ever had to deal with those type of people, it's not easy because they all want to go in their own direction and they're passionate about it. So we got to keep this whole thing together. And it was just fantastic. I mean, my entire adult life, I have never done anything on my own. I swear to God, since I was 18 years old, I've been part of a team. I've just been very lucky to be a part of a team of really, really good people. And I have no idea how to say it any different. I mean, everybody that I worked with at H&K and Team One, they all bring it. They all bring it. They wouldn't be there if they didn't. I mean, we look at when we bring in new people in, what can they bring to the table? We don't. Oh yeah, they can do the course. Oh great, I can get anybody to do the course. I need somebody passionate about doing that course. And so what happened when I left H&K, I don't know. If you don't mind, I'll tell you the quick little story about that. So H&K was sold. It was owned by British Aerospace, and they sold H&K. I was the only VP of sales there left. There was a president, a VP of sales. I think we had a VP of finance also. But at one point we had either 3 or 4 different VPs for sale. government sales, law enforcement sales, commercial sales, and something else, I guess. But I basically had all of those when I left. But they sold it, and the new owners decided to put their own people in, and they were extremely good to me. HK, the new owners said, okay, here's your walking papers, but we don't need you. We're going to put our own people. And I would do the same thing if I bought the company. I have nothing bad to say about H&K. But when I left, we had 40 adjunct instructors at HK and 10 full-time instructors. All the adjuncts said, okay, well, not right off the bat, but they stopped working for H&K. Not all of them, but many of them. And they were wondering what I was going to do. And then when I created Team One March, so that was December of 2002, March of 2003, I started Team One Network. And all of those 40 adjuncts all came over. And 5 of the 10 full-time guys had quit already and came over on Team One. So that was fantastic, made me feel good. And we just continued on, and started that. And it was, it was a lot of fun. We didn't start actually training classes until December of 2003. Ron McCarthy taught my first class for Team One, and it was a commander's class. So, but I had known Ron from when I went to LAPD training back in 1984. So, we're not great friends, but we knew each other and we respected each other, So anyway, so that, and then HK decided, I think a year and a half later, that we don't want a training division anymore. And it just basically, they just handed it to me. And I was like, okay, this is great. So that was a good jump start. That answer it?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely had an influence on how you not only established Team One, but how you came forward. But let's kind of fast forward a little bit. How does that experience and how it built lead you to what Team One Network is today? And the reason I ask this is because your influence on law enforcement training, whether it is armor training, whether it's reality-based training, whether it is live fire training, you have a tremendous influence on law enforcement training from A to Z. And it is absolutely an impressive thing that you've done. How did you leverage, you have a lot of those instructors, but how did you leverage that experience into what you've built Team One into today? Because it is unprecedented what you've done, and you've got some of the best instructors, a wide variety of classes, and a standard of excellence that you've been able to sustain for 20 years.
So I remember having a conversation with the last president of H&K, Ian Stafford, and I told him that HK does not understand what they have with the training division. So I'll give you just a little history that, then I'll go into the Team One thing. So when I first started there, I remember the Geschäftsführers. There was 4 of them. They're like the vice presidents and the directors over at HKO Obendorf in Germany, and they all said, "How are you guys training law enforcement and military back in the U.S.? That would never happen in Germany. They will not talk to private entities, manufacturers for training at all. They go to their own people and get that training and develop that training." And I said, well, all of our people all have experience there. They all have past law enforcement or military experience. I said, and people go there because we have time to develop classes, just like all of us here. We work on developing classes and trying to fine tune them. So fast forward, they never thought it would work. Well, that'll work in the U.S., but never going to work in Europe, never going to work in Germany, and all that. So I don't know what year it was, but we went with ILEETA. We did some regional international training conferences, and we trained. There was usually 10 different countries there. Joe, like PID and all that. We did all this training there, and they got to know us. And so they started asking HK Obendorf, Germany, hey, can we get your guys to come over here and train? They couldn't believe it. And then we sold HK Obendorf, sold guns to the SAS, Australian SAS. And they asked us if we would go over there and train the SAS. Gene Zink went over there with me, did an armorer's course. I went over there. He did the armorer's course. Then we both did a live fire shootouts class for the Australian SAS because they bought HK USPs. And so then it just went on from there. So now we go back to Team One, and what we basically became was little mini training divisions for a lot of manufacturers. Streamlight was my first sponsor, and they're still with us. They're a fantastic company, and we've grown with them. When we first got on with them, they had nobody. They had no tactical lights. Everything was for patrol and, the Stingers, the SL-20s, and stuff like that. Now they have an enormous selection of lights, and we've been part of that. We do the training for them, and we've helped them. Blackhawk, Benelli, Springfield. We just got Smith and Wesson on board, and so and we're using that. Like Bushnell right now, they're red dots. You do a fantastic red dot program, but we're using Bushnell and Trijicon red dots, and we're getting them exposure. So when you ask, like, where did Team One come from? I could not survive on just training. We are mini training divisions for all these manufacturers. So, and we do it a little bit different because we don't rely on what's at our training location. We bring what we need. And all of you that have ever traveled know exactly what I'm talking about when somebody says, I got a great range, I got steel targets, and I got all this, and you show up and they got a 6-lane range that's got a berm about 8 foot, and all the steel is all shot up, and you're like, what am I going to do? So, So anyway, I don't want to keep.
I'd like to remember that if I can, John. One of the things about the ILEETA conference is the expo, and there is this massive. If you've been there, but the manufacturers and the sales folks, the products, the industry that comes to this conference, there's quite an array there, and many of them actually have relationships with Team One, and so I think based on what you just shared with us and my understanding of Team One, you're kind of in a unique position to talk about this. The relationship between the trainer and industry. Our trainers that come to ILEETA, they are influential in their agencies, and I'm speaking to our audience right now, but this as well, John. They are so influential in their departments. They are leaders in so many different ways. Can you kind of talk about the importance of trainers keeping their finger on the pulse of technology real quick and how important that is?
Yes, absolutely. It is a gigantic thing, because just go back to when you started in law enforcement and think about the equipment that you were using and what you're using now, right? And the technology that's out there. It is absolutely changed. Now I'm looking at 40 years. I have a picture that Dick Kramer drew of me with an MP5 with an SL-20 hose clamp to the top of MP5. How many people are using that right now? That doesn't happen anymore, and there's no need for that to happen. When we were training, we put the Surefire lights, the the handguard lights on MP5, people were losing their mind. It was like, oh my God, I can shoot in the dark and see what I'm doing. It's just like, it's like, oh, it's so easy. Why didn't we do this before? But with technology, I think it's very important that we understand, the taser. Taser's been great, right? But we can't taser people to jail, all the way to jail. Like, oh, okay, come on, let's go with me. We still have to teach the tactics and stuff to go with that. But all the new technology out there that is available and people are not aware of it or are aware of it, but they don't know how to use it. That's the real scary part. Is sometimes they buy it and they have no idea what they're doing with it. So going to these expos now, I'm probably different because I go to the SHOT Show every year and I see what's going on there and I look at new product and I have a pretty good relationship with our sponsors, so I know what's coming or what's getting ready to come. But you have to understand that you have the technology out there, but you also have to know how to properly use it. Good technology, it to me, my daughter will appreciate this. I have a brand new Apple computer. All right. I can do about 3 things on it. Right. My email. I cannot use that. And I probably need to go for other training and stuff like that. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, is that, understanding how to use it. And when we're talking, my computer is not a life or death situation, although sometimes I think it is. But when we're talking about cops understanding how to use their equipment, it is a life or death situation, and so the other thing about ILEETA is the almost the perfect size show. If you go to SHOT Show, you can see probably everything that's on ILEETA, but nobody's going to talk to you because there's too much stuff going on, and they're trying to sell product to distributors and dealers and things like that. At ILEETA, a guy will talk to you for 20, 30 minutes without any problem and explain everything, and you'll get to know all that. And it's not a sales pitch. He's asking you, how would you use it? This is how we recommend using it. You can see it all. You guys do demonstrations. So that's what's different about ILEETA in the smaller shows. The other thing with that is that you can go to ILEETA and I don't know how many instructors you have there. I'm going to say at least 50, 60 instructors teaching probably 2 or 3 programs while they're there. You can go and look at all these different instructors and see what they're doing with that technology or just talking about that technology. And you get a whole different level. I've always told this to people, is that I've trained with some major departments, and they're very good. But I've trained with guys that have 20-man departments, and they work their ass off to come up with a good. You're talking about a scenario-based program. You watch some of these guys and the education that they have and what they're trying to do on it. Don't blow any of those guys off. I love going to ILEETA and watching what the little guy, he's from a department in Missouri somewhere. I don't know where it is, not familiar with it, but he's got an excellent presentation, and that's extremely important that I think your audience needs to know. Don't go, oh, okay, this guy's from, some big department. I got to go see that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's so. Did that answer?
It did. I heard 2 important takeaways in there. The last part being, don't discount any of the various programs, because there's been some tremendous things that come out of smaller agencies. And if we look at some of the nation's most critical incidents, some of them occur in the smallest departments with, the smallest resources. And so, a lot of lessons learned from them. And then the other thing I heard you say was the expo is part of the training event. And so to the potential attendees and the leaders who might see this, whether or not we should send somebody, that expo, that opportunity to engage, John hit the nail on the head, that 20 minutes with a manufacturer or a sales rep to really have that conversation, that's part of training. There's learning happening there. So yeah, John, you answered the question definitely.
Think about if you were asking a question to pick any manufacturer and you're on the phone with customer service and you're asking them a question, on the phone compared to talking to that person at the expo at ILEETA. What kind of information are you going to get? The whole difference. And that's not picking on any customer service people. It's just the way it is when you're face to face with somebody, so.
Oh, absolutely. John, you've been involved in training a long time, and you've said, a whole bunch of different agencies, traveled the world. Thinking back, when you first got into law enforcement training, what were the two, or let's say three top qualities you brought to law enforcement training back then? And fast forward to today, what are the top three that you're bringing to law enforcement? Those top three qualities you're bringing to law enforcement training today.
The first one is realistic. It has to be realistic. You think about what we teach people. We're just going through the motions, like firearms instruction. Like, okay, we're going to show you how to hit the bullseye or hit the target or whatever. That's great. That's part of it, right? But now you have to think about, somebody shooting back at you. One of the things that we have is we developed it, and we at H&K was a paint gun that we could put remotely down range and shoot at people. So now, right, we're trying to teach use of cover as a firearms instructor, trying to teach use of cover, and you're telling people, oh, you're not using the cover right now, and they're doing it. And well, you put a paint gun down range, right, and we have ballistic protection for it, and we just shoot one round, a paintball round, and it hits that barricade, changes their whole attitude. Because they don't want to get hit with that paintball. So we decided that, okay, you know what? We're going to create a shoot back trailer. We had a trailer that had 7 paint guns on it. It was a 20-foot trailer. Porta-Target made it for us. 6 guns were stationed solid. The other one was worked on a joystick back behind. The instructor could do that with a TV camera pointing at the people shooting. We had 4 barricades that people had to move and engage, and the targets were reactive. They fell down, all right, they popped up and did all this. People were like, you want to see use of cover? Now you can see use of cover, because they didn't want to get hit with that paint gun. And it was so bad that our instructors, when we were done and we were just moving around, everybody would look back to see, like, is there anybody by the controller of the paint guns? Because they knew if they walked in front of that paint gun trailer, somebody was going to shoot their ass. So, but that's what we're talking about, is realism. So when we talk about going in on entries, we put, Gary Klugowitz came up with this term, but we have a Mr. Green Jeans, a fighting man dumming, that we hung up on a pulley. And they didn't know this, but when you go through the door, this Mr. Green Jeans was this 150-pound dummy that was blocking your way. Nothing in his hands, but you had to get through him, and we had a pulley. And so you had to elbow strike him or knee strike him and take him down so you could get through the door, and your rest of your team could get through the door. So that was more realistic. So that was our big thing about it. It has to be realistic, and it has to be, the word, I don't want to say affordable, but it has to be realistic in time. Because imagine, I'd be willing to bet you, all of you, in your critiques, everybody somewhere says, oh, it should be a day longer, or another day, or another 2 hours, or whatever. Yeah, right. But your department's not going to give you, 14 days to go to, class. So you have to take the use of your time and make it very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Efficient.
Useful. So, yeah. Yes. Very good. Yes. So, that's a big thing. And you have to have instructors that have credibility, you know. So if you don't have credibility, they're just going to blow you out of water.
When it comes to your influence over training, Billy brought something up earlier today that I think that is kind of important, and I think that John, I think that you're in a perfect position to kind of answer this question and help him out with this.
Which question?
Yeah, right. You got tons of them. We only got an hour, so.
Well, so one of the questions that had presented to me, I sat down and talked to Wayne Wolf, drove up here last night and hung out with us, and I asked him, I said, hey, if you had a chance to ask John Myers a question, what would it be? And he said, in all your years of training, what is the one thing or most important thing that you have learned? And so I told him I would try to ask that question for him.
Wow.
Dwayne Wolf. And, for a lot of us, Dwayne Wolf I don't want to minimize Coach's influence on anybody because Coach is an amazing guy. But I think Dwayne is kind of taking Coach's influence over the modern, version of ILEETA, or today's version of ILEETA, where Brian and Joe and I look at Coach as the ultimate mentor. There are a lot of these younger guys that are looking at Dwayne kind of in the same way. And Dwayne that's a great question.
I have to go back to the team. You have a team and you listen to them and, you argue over all kinds of things. I don't want to talk about the product, but I think Joe was there. But we had a product that we were looking at trying to use. And I had instructors that were like, I am never going to use this product. This is going to get officers killed. This is ridiculous. Why are we even looking at this? And other instructors were looking at it. But then it basically, and guys are doing demos and practicing with it and stuff like this and saying, no, it's just not going to work. You get a group of good people and listen to them and try it out. But you have to, that's the other thing. You get somebody who will say, oh, no, I'm not using that. I don't like it because of whatever, Well, okay, why not? Okay, let's try it. Let's go through all that. But you have to respect your team. And like I said, I can't imagine doing anything without a team. If John Meyer went out there and said, okay, I'm going to create a course without any input, I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. There's absolutely no way. I have to bounce it off, a lot of people before I feel comfortable with it, And the one thing there's to say is that the only reason you're on my team is because you're not afraid to disagree with me. Okay, that's really important. I want people to say, "You're an idiot." This isn't going to work. Now, I shouldn't say that because there's probably some people out there that do work with me, and they're going to say this immediately to me tonight. But
I'm pretty sure you just got a phone full of texts.
Really, right? But that is extremely important. I always want to have the feedback from people because you can miss something. I can go on and on with stories about where I remember one time we were doing a search with my team at DOD, and I had in my head that we had to learn how to do this grid pattern, and we were going to do this damn grid pattern no matter what. So we were looking for a lost hunter. It was no big tactical thing, and I had somebody just go hide a dummy with an orange vest on it and go hide him in the woods in this area, right? I had everybody going through rocks and stuff and going, and the lights failed within an hour, especially back then, But one of my guys said, hey, before we do any of that, why don't we just ride the roads and see if we can see anything from the roads, right? Well, after we did this 2 hours of everybody getting torn up with rocks and bushes and stuff like this, guy said, well, why don't we ride the road? I said, just go ride the damn roads. Like 5 minutes later, okay, we got them. And I'm like, oh, like, okay, so listen to your guys, It's just, so yeah, so we need to stop with the stories, because all the stories are me being on the bad end of the story. So I don't have any really great stories where I'm always right. That's for sure. So
You're a kind of a visionary in law enforcement training. You brought in some female instructors for some specific training. What guided you to do that?
okay, so Luann and Kathy Vonk. Okay, Luann Hamill and Kathy Vonk. We brought them in because, again, this is what happens: is we go around, we see people that have their poop in a group. Right? I guess I can say that. And we saw that. Actually, I didn't see it. Gene Zink saw it initially, and he talked to me about this. And I'm like, okay, great. And the other thing, I go by our instructors that are on staff. Their recommendation is like gold to me, because they would never bring somebody on the team that can't hold their weight. I know that, So I tell everybody. I mean, we get people that we're putting on all the time, and I tell them, like, hey, this instructor recommended you. I don't need, send me your resume. Just send me a quick bio, but I don't need your resume. I've never seen a bad resume, but the recommendation is golden. That's your golden ticket, And, but anyway, with Luann and Kathy, we saw them, and then we were talking about doing a bike program. I was like, hey, that's great. We haven't done a bike program. I'd love to do it. I don't know anything about bikes. You do. What can we do? And then run them in there, and then we critique, like, okay, what's this? What's that? But Luann and Kathy, they were great, and they fit right in with our group. But we didn't bring them in because they were women. We created a female course, and this was very controversial. And I was at an ASLET conference. I can't think of the woman that spoke, but she was talking about how she trains women, and not because they're weaker or anything like that. It's just because they're built different. And one of the things I always remember is the guy can climb a rope, and what muscles does he use? His chest muscles, his arm muscles. Woman climbs a rope. What does she use? Her leg muscles. That's all the difference. But a lot of times we have a male dominant training area or training group that are all males, and they're going to show what works for them. So I watched her explain that, and there was many others. And I said, well, we should have a female officer survival program that we can help females, because they may not be getting the training. And it was all focused on females and what they could do and what they couldn't do. It wasn't about, oh, you're a female and you're weaker or anything. It wasn't that. It was different. Kathy Vonk, I remember I went to a program that Kathy Vonk put on, and I don't know if it was ILEETA or ASLET or ILEETA, but it was about heart monitors, right? And this was way before. The only thing was out was Polar, no Apple iWatches or any of that. And she did this program, and I went in there, and there was one or two people in the class. And I got in there late, but I sat in there and I listened to our whole program. And I thought, wow, this is so good. It had nothing to do with female anything, but it had to do about heart monitors and watching where your heart is. And she explained where she went into a situation where it was a Middle Eastern group. Anyway, they took the guy out, and it just created all kinds of problems. But her heart rate went from, 80 to like 130 when this guy come running out of the house to protect this other guy. I probably don't have the story completely correct, but the point is, I learned two things about this: about how the heart rate monitor could be useful in training, and also about just understanding that if a guy went and grabbed this guy out of the building, nobody would have been upset. It would have been no big deal. But because a female took a guy out, created all kinds of panic and hysteria. So we need to teach people that. That was 20 years ago at least. So maybe we're over that now. But that's the kind of stuff that you have to look at in your training and talk about that. And we are doing that now. So, but back then we weren't, so.
Well, we're coming out of the hour, so let's. Sorry, Todd. Go ahead and ask a question. We'll just do a round robin.
I really don't have a question. I just got a comment. I mean, the addition of Luann and Kathy to Team One Network, they are some of my favorite people of all time. Luann has been an inspiration to me, and in a whole bunch of ways, shapes, and forms. And so, good on you to recognize the importance of and the value of their contribution to what we do early on before anybody else, because I think that is absolutely critical to what we do. And it doesn't matter whether it's bike stuff, firearm stuff, leadership issues. It is absolutely critical, and you recognized it before anybody else, and it was an amazing contribution to what we do. So thank you very much.
Well, again, you gave me the credit, but it's not all me. It was Gene Zink and other guys, So I don't know what's going on with my video, but it's like, okay.
7 o'clock, 7:02, 8:02 on that other side of the coin there. Joe, any last thoughts, comments for John?
Yeah, so believe me, I've got a ton of questions, and even though I've had plenty of time to ask them, I'm not going to tonight to belabor the point here. But I do want to say, on behalf of all trainers, the members of ILEETA, but especially the dozens and maybe even approaching 100 plus that you have directly either influenced, had as part of the team at some point. Some of them are in that picture behind you there, drawn by Dick Kramer. And for those of you that don't know, you've ever played the game Rainbow Six, John Meyer is actually on the cover of the original Rainbow Six box. He was the muse for that. You've had such tremendous influence on the industry, John, and trainers in general. So I just want to say thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart, but on behalf of everyone who's ever worked with you or for you.
Thank you. Well, hey, the one thing I think it's important too, because this is an ILEETA thing. I don't think Team One has missed an ILEETA conference. I know I missed one in Wheeling one year because of something that came up, and but Team One is always instructing at ILEETA, and it's a great organization, and it's important that people go to these organizations. You're not going to learn if you don't. So.
Hey, Brian, if you'll, I know we're at the top of the hour here and we do want to end on time, but John, any guidance for, folks who we're constantly in transition as trainers, and, clearly, a lot of the Team One instructors, yourself, obviously being, the leadership of it, in that private sector space, Brian, myself, Todd, Billy, we're there, but guidance from you for folks who are getting ready to leave, they're looking at trying to either side hustle as a trainer or start a training company, any words of wisdom for those who are looking to venture out on their own?
Oh boy, I would just say
I
that
know, loaded question. I apologize for asking it at the end, but I'm sure it's something on everybody's mind.
you just have to be consistent and be real. I mean, I've watched Todd and his stuff. I mean, one of the things, I know you're trying to get out of here, but we just had a Zoom meeting. I think you were on it, Joe, with George Harris. I haven't talked to George in years, and he's coming out with a book. And I can't wait to see that book. It's got probably tons of good information. Yeah, I know you guys talked about Ken Murray, looking at all these different books, Dave Spalding, all these guys. I go back. I'm dating myself. Brian Felter wrote a book, had to be 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, that I used as a Bible to just check to make sure I was right. So, I mean, and I told George, I said, George, I'm going to help promote your book because I probably stole half the shit that you're teaching, and he said, well, that's okay, because I stole it from somebody else. And I told Todd when I saw him at ILEETA, I said, Todd, just by the way, we changed our course from red dot optic to pistol mounted optics. And I didn't come up with that on my own. I saw you did it, so we're doing it. So whatever, but you didn't copyright it, so but we all do that. I mean, we all go to different training and look at that. Nobody's the grand master. It's just there's a ton of people out there, and don't be afraid to listen to people that you've never heard of before. Some of them have the best ideas.
Great word.
Well, you were talking about pistol mounted optics. I will give credit where credit is due. Everything that I do in my business it's been an inspiration from you. You have set the standard. You have raised the bar for what it means to be a private training company within our industry. And there is nobody else that we can point to that has done anything that better than what you've done it, and with the best morals and ethics and the people that you surround yourself with. I really appreciate everything you've brought to our industry. You've been an amazing mentor and inspiration to a lot of us.
Well, thank you, but I appreciate that.
Billy, any final thoughts, comments, questions?
No, I just really appreciate y'all letting me come on here, and it was good talking to John, and thank you for answering my questions. I got a lot of work ahead of me in the scenario-based training and learning how to do that without it turning into a giant paintball match. And so maybe reaching out some more later.
John, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us tonight. And I also want to thank you for being a huge supporter of ILEETA. Your valued leadership, your inspiration, everything that you do for ILEETA has been noticed by many, and we all appreciate that. I think I speak for everybody at ILEETA, but thank you for bringing Team One to all the ILEETA conferences and bringing your wisdom, your thoughts, and your thoughts from your team. So we all appreciate that. Joe, Todd, Billy, it was a pleasure having you guys on again. We're going to do this one again next month, August 21st. We will have Chip Huth on, retired Kansas City PD. Very good, inspirational thought leader. So please don't miss that. John, hang on. We're going to sign off here in just a second or two, but stick with us on the other side. You all have a great night.